Now methods can take different parameters. Notice that main is taking one parameter. It is args, and it is going to an array of strings. So let's go ahead and modify this to take in a parameter. So we can say string name, for instance. And now instead of just saying hello world, we can go ahead and put a $sign there to do string interpolation, and then do dollar or curly brace name. And so now this method takes in one parameter. That parameter is of type string, and inside of the method it will be known as name. And then all we're doing here is we're just using string interpolation to print out whatever is in that name variable. Over here, notice that when we hover over it, it says method say hello has one parameter, but is invoked with 0 arguments. So we need to actually give it some string. Now, writer is automatically adding this name colon there, and that is just kind of helping you as the developer know that, hey, this particular argument here is going to be a name. Now, it's not actually in that code, so if you were to copy this line and paste it into, say, Notepad or whatever, it would not actually have name there. This is just writer trying to be helpful and show you it. Much like this usage up here. This is not an actual line of code. Notice there's a blank spot there. That is, again, just the IDE trying to help you. But now when we call this, notice we are not getting any errors. We hover over this, we actually see that it says say hello string name. And when we run this, it will say hello, whatever is in name, which will be Jeremy. So it will say hello Jeremy. So running this, we get hello Jeremy, exclamation mark, printed out to the console. You can pass in strings, you can pass in ints, you can pass in all sorts of other types of values. Really any type of object that you can create in C#, you can pass it into methods. And there's varying ways to do that. The other thing we can do is we can go ahead and change this from, or actually not change this, let's go ahead and create a new method and have this method say calculate out the number of hours worked. So static int num hours worked. And then for this, we'll go ahead and take in a string name. And now we want to do something. So first off, the naming convention, each one of these words is capitalized, something that you get used to. Variables, on the other hand, those are usually camel case, to where the first character is lowercase and then uppercase after that. Methods are always capital case or capitalized like that. So let's go ahead and say if name dot equals, and let's just say if I work, and I want to go ahead and lowercase this just in case. So there's a string comparison dot invariant culture ignore case, because I'm going to compare it against English style. So if the name passed in here is equal to Jeremy, well, then I'm going to go ahead and say that the hours worked is equal to 5,000. Return 5,000. So I'm just returning an integer. Notice that's an integer. I'm returning an integer. Otherwise, return 10. So if you are not me, then you only worked 10 hours. If you are me, then apparently I worked 5 hours this last week, or 5,000 hours this last week, which is, I don't know how it's possible, but maybe I dreamed and multiple dreams, who knows. But now when we call this num hours worked, so now when we call this method actually returns something. So just doing this right now, we're not going to get anything. Nothing actually exciting happens. Unlike say hello, that was actually calling this console write line there. But we can go ahead and capture that. So we can go ahead and say int num hours. Oops. Put a semicolon there. And then num hours is equal to that console.write line. You worked num hours this week. And so now when we run this, we'll get, you worked 5,000 hours this week. So we can go ahead and expand this a little bit by string fname, or first name. And now instead of just giving it a static value, we can say console.writeLine, please enter your first name. Actually, I'm just going to do write. It's habit to type write line, but I don't want to have a new line there. And then now we can go ahead and read this in. First name is equal to console.readLine. And now we have that variable first name there, so we can go ahead and pass that in, first name. And so now we're just storing that into a variable first name. We're passing first name to this method. This method is doing whatever. We can kind of treat this method as a black box right now, since we already wrote it. And we're just taking the result from there, and we're printing out how many hours that individual worked. So if we run this, please enter your first name, you worked 5,000 hours this week. If I run it again and I say, Luke, you worked 10 hours this week. So combining parameters here and some conditional logic and everything else, you can get completely different values and completely different answers depending upon what is actually passed into each of those methods.